Sure. Well, continuing on about the whole social services thing, it's been a huge push under a couple of Republican governors now to go and say that mental health services and a variety of services are really better provided in the community, which may or may not be true, but then there's no funding really for community services. What are some of your views on that?
Well, it is true that the idea of closing Hastings and other those large facilities, the idea was a good idea up front, if it had enough of funding, but it doesn't have enough funding. And the idea was to have these facilities more closer to the families, because that's very important for these persons. But that isn't occurring. There is in some ways, Lincoln has a model program. It's a transitioning program where individuals who have severe mental illness, who cannot be put out into the local community, are given special treatment, and oftentimes it's medication, until they can make the transition into what might be more typical community residences for mentally ill patients.
And, well, as we look at budget issues, which are huge with the state legislature right now, I'm sure you're tracking that.
Yes.
Revenue forecasting is definitely not positive for this year and the next few years. Well, what do you see are some of the flashpoints on revenue and how we're going to go and be able to respond as a state to the need for services?
You mean for mental health services?
Well, for any services,
for any services,
whether it's Medicaid or...
Well, sometimes the state needs to spend money to save money.
No, that's very true.
And one of the ways, particularly going back to the families again, when those children are out in foster care, if they don't have enough help, they end up in the judicial system, and the cost is way up high.
Sure.
In that kind of a setting. So to save money, you have to spend more money to help take care of those children.
Yes. And what are your thoughts about this upcoming thing with Medicare and Medicaid and the costs with the baby boomer generation going and starting to retire?
Well, that's all happening right now. The baby boom, was it last year or this year that the first baby boomers became 60?
Yeah, I think it was late last year, yeah.
Well, there's a collision course that we're heading for. In 10 years, it's projected, and that's not very far, 10 years goes pretty fast. In 10 years, state revenue and entitlement needs are equal. After that, entitlements are on the increase and revenues stay the same.
Sure.
So we have a lot of long-range thinking we've got to do, and what are we going to do about that, and we don't want to wait until it happens.
So when we also talk about state finances, we often talk about property tax and then aid to local school districts and how those issues are connected together. Well, what are some of your thoughts on state aid to local schools?
Well, yesterday I was talking to a lot of different citizens, and frequently when I would talk about what the issues are, high property tax kept coming up over and over again.
Sure.
And that's the same, you hear that all over the state. And compared to other states, our taxes are high. But what was you were asking about state aid for schools?
Yeah, state aid for schools.
Well, we have got to, Nebraska does not rank very high in state aid to schools compared to other states. So we need to increase that. Because if you don't have an educated citizenry, you're not going to be a very viable economically or anything else.
Well, then, We also look at that the state has put levy lids on local school districts, and that limits local school districts' ability to go and meet the needs of children and to meet their mission of making sure that children are educated in the state. Now, here in Lincoln, we have a relatively healthy, stable, growing economy, but in outstate Nebraska, there are a lot of challenges when you're looking at levy lids. What are some of your thoughts on those?
Well, whether we should have lids or don't have lids.
Well, I think that's up to you. Do you think that we should or not?
I am not crazy about lids because it seems to me that school boards are elected to make decisions for the people of their community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know lids are put on sometimes so that one school district doesn't have more, that is more wealthy, can get ahead of other schools.
Mm-hmm.
But if local people are willing either to raise their own taxes to pay for the schools, which they do, they should be permitted to do it.
So you believe in local control of school districts then?
Absolutely.
That's
and
very
I don't
good.
think state aid, increasing state aid is going to take away any of the local control. You know, Nebraskans are very famous for local control.
Mm-hmm.
But the state is the only, compared to school boards, has a much wider array of revenue streams than do school boards.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are some, I ran across one taxpayer in the 21st district who said that his tax bill, he happened to be a farmer, was $30,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he voted against a local bond issue. And not because he didn't want to support the schools, in fact, he was a school board member,
Mm-hmm.
but it was because the change, the bond that was going to go through was going to cost him $3,000 more. He was already paying $28,000.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's, unfortunately, we don't have the population base. Now, one way to help this is to improve the economy. And one way to improve the economy and have more tax base is not through bringing in smokestacks, but it is developing more what we might call entrepreneurs or small business development. The growth in Nebraska is in those areas of 10 people with 10 employees. So if we can improve our economy, that then increases the tax base of people who pay taxes. So it is. So it's a rather. It's not an easy question. Oftentimes, I think. I told somebody yesterday. I said, you know, anybody runs on a saying that they're not going to increase taxes, or the taxes are going to, you know, is really not saying the truth, because the reality is we have no more people than we've had many, many years ago. But unless we can improve, if we could improve the economy, which I think we can, that would help solve some of that problem.